Alright, so it's actually a few days later, and it turns out that Windows Storage Spaces is not what I'm going with. Something's not quite sitting right with me about how I have to do it. Basically, with 3 hard drives and one SSD, I can't do parity, so I would need 2 SSDs, I think, to do parity and 3 hard drives, which means buying another 512 gig NVMe SSD and adapter, and I don't feel like spending that extra on it. I mean, that would protect against, if one of the SSDs dies, that would be good, but, whatever. The other thing is that Windows storage spaces, if I need to boot up to Linux or something, I don't think that will show as a regular drive. Um, that's a little weird. And what I could do is I could set up tiered storage with the 5 terabyte drives in RAID, which is 9.09 terabytes total. Um, I could bring that RAID array into storage spaces, and then I could put the SSD in there and then do tiered storing with those. And I did test that, but Windows Storage Spaces has really weird inconsistencies with speed. Um, yeah, I'm not really sure why, but it's just weird. And something's rubbing me wrong about it in general, especially combining 5 terabyte RAID into storage spaces and then adding something else. I don't know, it doesn't seem whatever. I'm not sure what I'm actually going to use right now. I'm emailing the Primo Cache guys. Um, Basically, Primo Cache is probably what I want, where it'll cache reads and writes. So that basically, if I have a folder, like a video project that I haven't worked on for months, and it's on the hard drive, the first time I open it up, it'll cache it, and it'll be fast from that point on. But Primo Cache is there's this weird thing where it'll copy really well and high speed, and then it'll just stop completely. The transfer speed will go down to nothing, and I don't know why. So I'm trying to find out. The other option that I might use is StableBit Drive Pool. Now, StableBit Drive Pool doesn't do tiered storage. It caches. No, it doesn't cache at all either. It combines multiple things together, but there's an SSD plugin that lets you basically say you only want to fill an SSD so much, but you can also set it as a landing zone. So the way I configured it for testing is that all the files would go to the SSD first, and then when it's full, it'll dump off to the hard drive. The problem with that is that when you open up an old file that's not on the SSD, it's not going to get put back on the SSD. It's only on the SSD until 512 gigs of new data has been through it, at which point it pushes it off to the mechanical storage. Um, so that's not quite ideal. However, still, but Drive Pool has a couple advantages. One, the speed is really consistent. It's faster than Primo Cache, and it's also it doesn't have that weird issue where the speed drops out and has weird fluctuations. It's a lot more stable. It's a lot closer to just having an NVMe SSD share. And that's probably because Primo Cache is doing some extra stuff. I don't know quite what. I changed the cluster size to 4 kilobytes, and that helped some. But it still has inconsistencies, and it still drops down to nothing after a certain amount of data copy, and it's consistent, so I don't know why. So right now I'm using Primo Cache. Oh, the other advantage of StableBit Drive Pool is that I get the extra capacity of the SSD. So it's also cheaper because I have a server OS. The server edition of Primo Cache is pretty expensive. Drive Pool is the same, so it's cheaper. And it gives me the extra capacity, so I actually have 9.5 terabytes of storage instead of 9. So what I might do, depending on how it works out, is I might just buy a 500 gig SATA SSD, and then have Drive Pool put everything onto the NVMe storage, and then have that move onto the 500 gig SSD, and then move on to the 5 terabyte RAID array. So then I would have pretty much 10 terabytes on that network share, which would look really nice. And then I have 500 gigs of NVMe storage that is blistering fast. And then the stuff that I still haven't worked on for a little while, that goes on to a regular SATA SSD. Pretty good, but I can't hit it from multiple computers at full speed or anything. It'll slow down if I do that, but it'll still be fast. And then the stuff that I haven't touched in a terabyte of data, that goes onto the mechanical storage. And since it's a RAID 5, I'm still getting double the read speed on my hard drives, so that's not horrible. So we're just going to do some tests here. So we can go ahead and do a one-way copy. So you can see that's pretty good. It has a really nice, big, fast burst, probably loading into the RAM. And then it gets to about the speed that the SSD in my workstation can handle. So this is a secondary SSD. This desktop is my main one. So then we can go ahead and copy to the desktop. And so you can see here where it's dipping down to like 300 and some megabytes a second and then goes back up. Stable bit drive pool doesn't do that. And even Windows Storage Spaces doesn't quite do it this much. I'm not really sure what's causing it. But yeah, that is just something that's being really weird. Stable bit drive pool is just a solid straight line across. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and copy one back, but since this is from two different drives, we can actually copy them both at the same time and get a good, 450 megabytes per second from both drives at the same time. But this is the situation where it often will drop down to 0 transfer speed. It looks like it might have handled it this time. Oh, nope. So look at that. So it plummeted down. And let's just leave this real time so you can see what it does. So sometimes it'll have a speed listed on the file copy like this. Other times it'll just go down to 0. But as you can see, we're not really sending any data. And if we actually open this up, you can see that we're writing at 80 megabytes per second or so, but it should be able to do a little faster than that. And the other thing is, they're shingled magnetic drives, so that's not good. But there's an NVMe SSD cache that has 256 or 230 gigabytes allocated to it. So it shouldn't be hung up by copying to the mechanical storage. It should just all dump into the NVMe SSD. But it's getting hung up by the speed of the hard drives. I don't think, the write speed will be the same. So that's probably about right, but a little bit lower than it should be for the mechanical hard drives because they're shingled magnetic. But the fact that it is just stopped completely, just like stopped the transfer, that doesn't really make any sense to me. It should be able to all dump onto the SSD and then just, finish off from there. And you can see we have like a 12-second response time. So let's see when this actually, I guess, decreases, then it'll probably transfer over. So we got like through 5 or 6 gigs there after copying a whole other large file, but then it just stopped like this. And this is what's really killing Primo Cache for me. Honestly, like, I like the idea. Oh, hey, there we go, finally. I like the idea of having the extra storage versus losing it, basically, from being visible and being able to, use drive pool instead. Oh, yeah, and see, look, right at the end there again. But being able to cache even really old files once I open them up once, being able to do that using Primo Cache is something that I do like compared to drive pool. And I'm not sure offhand if that would be worth the like $100 and some that it would cost me, considering currency conversion. That's what I had in mind initially. Although Windows Storage Spaces does combine them, it doesn't hide it. So it's sort of an in-between. But that thing where it just stops copying is just awful. I don't know why it does that. It's really bad. So let's go ahead and delete those. But as you can see, so that was copying that way. We'll go ahead and copy one thing there, copy one thing there. So this is another thing. It doesn't always do this, but the speed drops in half copying from the network share that's primo cached. And it shouldn't, because both of those things should be in the NVMe SSD cache. So you can see right now they climbed up to a pretty decent speed, but again, with stable bit drive pool, both of these would be solid because my NVMe SSD can do 1.6 gigs a second, so it can do 2 full streams like this at 500 megabytes a second. You can see it's capable of doing it on a single stream, but for some reason, with Primo Cache, it can't do it. And I don't think that it's a matter of it not being cached. What we can do is we can delete these and just copy them again right away, and they'll be absolutely cached at that point. So we'll delete that. So let's just copy those exact same files in the exact same spots. And you can see again they both drop down. Now this, I recognize this is thoroughly nitpicky and thoroughly a first world problem and thoroughly overkill for my use. I'm only editing 4K video, and Sony Vegas I still need to make video proxies because it can't handle 4K. But this is the sort of thing where I put the money in to get like this blistering fast performance, and I'm not getting it quite how I want it. It's really odd. See, because this now it climbs up and like maxes out the write speed of my SSD. So it should be able to max out both of them, and it can with stable bit drive pool, but it can't with Primo Cache. So I'll post an update video once I have this stuff figured out. Right now I don't know what I'm gonna do. I might do some more testing with Primo Cache, copy all my video projects into it, just to do more testing with it in the meantime. But at this point, I'm not sure what I want to do. To be honest, I'm pretty tempted just to buy a 500 gig SATA SSD and put that in here, and then have like a 10 terabyte network share. That data wouldn't be super safe, but I could also set it so that once a week it dumps everything to the hard drives. I don't know. It's still in its infancy as to exactly how I'm going to execute it, but I just wanted to share the progress now because I don't know how long it's going to be for a solution to be found, or if this is not really going to be possible to change using Primo Cache. So I guess stay tuned, and I'll let you guys know what I actually ended up going with.